So I've reached a self-actualized state. I'm having the common experience with everyone that I speak to where I'm just receiving everyone's projections. And so they see in me the parts of themselves that they're scared of, and they misperceive that as being me making them scared. And it happens with everyone that I interact with. And I'm wondering if this is something that you've seen before and if that's common.
No, I think you've fallen for the intellectualism paradigms and spirituality paradigms, even with the word self-actualization. Not that you can't use that word, but these things have particular colloquial and mutually agreed upon meanings in the world. And so your very first statement, I've reached a self-actualized state, that doesn't really have any meaning. And then what others perceive in you, like the foundation of it is all based upon manufactured concepts. So there's nothing real there. It's all, newspaper clippings that you've picked up from the world, and then you're asking questions based upon newspaper clippings.
I don't think you've engaged with the point that I raised, or the question that I had.
If the question is based upon something false, then the question really isn't a question.
Hi, Kapil. Are emotions part of the self?
Your voice broke up.
Sorry, I was asking if emotions are part of the self.
What isn't part of the self?
Kapil, I find that I borderline find it literally impossible not to prescriptionize everything you say just because of the distinct feeling I get whenever I read or listen to any of your work. Even though I know it's problematic at its fundamental nature, obviously pretty much I prescriptionize anything anyway, but whenever I listen to you or read any of your work, to be honest, it's literally impossible. It's not impossible, it's almost so automatic because of the distinct feeling I get. I don't even really have a direct question here, but is there just anything you can comment on this situation?
Well, you're not alone. I just don't. In some ways, how could it be otherwise? I mean, if your whole life you've said hello, how are you, and the other person has said hello, how are you, then if that's happened 18 million times, how can you expect to be something besides hello, how are you, if that's all that you know? That's why the truth is, it's just a different universe. And like from the root to the top of the tree, everything is just like you have to learn a new language. You have to learn a new way of being. I mean, everything. So like people who think they can make a lateral move and they come to, the truth, and they come to my work and they think, okay, well now they're gonna, come from where they have come, which is where everybody comes from naturally, not because it's their fault or anything, but that's just because that's all that exists is the prescriptive world. And like, there's no like separation of prescriptive versus non-prescriptive world. Like that doesn't exist. There's only the prescriptive world. And they come here and then they think, well, yeah, I understand what you said. And they didn't understand anything. I mean, they just read the words, or they consumed it in the same way that they consume everything else. And like, how could they not? Like, there's no sign, like, how could they not? Like, how could this not just be something else for them, right? The next thing in line, the next So if you've been taught to prescriptionize, and you've been encouraged to prescriptionize, and you've been conditioned to prescriptionize, and you've been trained to prescriptionize, like the thought of something not being prescriptive, it's not even a concept. It doesn't even exist. Like, that's like saying, you breathe air, and you, like, are you going to breathe air today, or are you going to choose to breathe something else? I mean, there's nothing, like, that question wouldn't even arise. And of course you're going to breathe air. So it's the same thing here. Like, it is not understood, and it'll never be understood because it's too much. Like, that's why I blame nobody for that. It's too much, right? Like, to come over here and say, okay, well now, and to be able to know that you have to, change your language and change your thinking and change your speech and change your word choice and change your shoes and change your hair. I mean, like, no one would know that. No one would know that, because this is just another thing in their long procession of things that they've come across. And they might find the word a little different. They might find the writing different. But how they process it is going to be, like, no matter how opposite it is and no matter how different it is, their processing mechanism is intact. That's the processing mechanism through which they've lived since the day they first took breath. And that mechanism is by way of prescription. And so much so that it shouldn't even be said, right? There's no such thing as this is prescriptive, because, like, what else would it be? Like, this is air. Like, but there's no option. There's no alternative. So when there's zero alternative, like, it's a no-brainer. It's a given. It's a constant. There's no choice to bring up. So it would never even be brought up. So where the person always begins is, okay, well, what kind of prescription is this?
But
right. That's where everyone's going to begin. That's the level.
But why do I have such a distinct feeling that I've never felt ever whenever I read or listen to your work? It does not seem the same as anything else. And it's a very distinct feeling that I cannot describe.
Well, I'm like, that's your own personal experience with it. But what I'm saying is, that's what I was saying. Like, even though everything is going to seem different, everything seems different to you when you read my work, but the processing mechanism, what are you going to do with that? Right? You can only, okay, it's fine. It's different. Fine. I'm not saying it's good or whatever. Okay. Now, what are you going to do with it? Right? And you can only do with it the mechanism that you brought with you, which is prescription.
Yeah.
So you have to, like, what else are you going to, like I said, are you going to ask yourself what element you're going to breathe today? Right? So that's why it's all about unconditioning, and that's why it's all about, or deconditioning. It's why it's all about unlearning and, removing the shackles and, understanding and recognizing that one's entire life is completely and utterly and totally shackled. Nothing is there of their own. Every word you speak, like the self-actualized guy, right? Every word you speak, you shouldn't even speak, right? Like a word shouldn't come out of your mouth. Like, obviously you have to use the and those are created mechanisms. So yes, that you cannot, invent a language. I get that. So you have to use that, the, and, but, is, not, it. But aside from the language, everything that you say and the order of the words that you put in to make a sentence, they're not your own. You're just a parrot, right? Not because you want to be or because you're wrong. Like, that's just what you know. That's conditioning. But the problem occurs is when one thinks that, no, I'm speaking these things and they're mine. Like, this is my own. This is not society's. Mm-hmm. This didn't come from intellectualization. This didn't come from the 17 books that the influencer recommended. This didn't come from the bestseller list. This didn't come from the motivational speaker. this didn't come from the influencer. This didn't come from, like, that's where the disconnect is. I mean, like, it all came from there. Every bit of it. It all came from spirituality or intellectualism or scholarly, or like, it all came from that which exists in the world. Obviously, right? Obviously. Well,
Yeah.
where else is it going to come from? Mars, right? That's where you live. You don't live on Mars. You live on the world, on Earth. So whatever's on Earth, that's what's going to come. Obviously, clearly, logically, you know. So, like, so that's why you prescriptionize. I mean, like you prescriptionize because what else would you do? Now, does it have to end there? Well, that's a very personal thing. Like, if one recognizes that, well, then, you know, a fork is created in the road before him. And in recognizing, like, with the exception of like 77 people in the world, no one is ever, like I said, I have a very small footprint in the world, right? So I reach 26 people, basically, right? So basically everyone is going to leave this earth, you know, at the end of, you know, we're all going to die. And never having even known about prescriptions, never having even known that they prescriptionize everything, and not even that, like even below that, not even having known that prescriptions, what they have done to him and what they have not given him, and not that it's bad and they should stop. I don't really care about it. You know, it's up to you. But no one's even going to get to, like, you know, level 0.00001. Right. So if at least you've gotten a peek of a peek of a peek behind the curtain, right, to know that, you know, you are prescriptionizing things, and even before that, more fundamental to that there is even such a thing as prescriptionizing. That prescriptions, there may be an actual alternative. I mean, that itself is like an earthquake, right? Even though it's infinite zeros with a 1 on the end. But like a fork in the road then occurs. And then through that recognition, then how one maneuvers is very personal, and there's no formula for that.
But when I identify the shackles, it seems so deep, Kapil. It's like 10 trillion layers of it. I look at my upbringing and I'm like, sorry to use language, but I feel like I've raped my mind, literally. And I just look at, to some degree, the past with so much dread. I just feel like there's 58 trillion layers of shackles that I can see, and at every peak I turn a corner, there's another shackle. And it's just...
Yeah, so 2 things to say about that. Number 1, that's why it's too much, right? And when I say it's too much, it doesn't mean it's too much, therefore you should stop. I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's too much in terms of it's too much to ask of someone. Not that I'm asking. I'm not asking, but it's too much. Nothing I call it. It's just too much, right? It isn't like a little bit of a
so much.
It's like everything, right? And so that's one thing. And the other thing is, you know, in making that statement, you realize that, like, how it simply cannot be prescriptions, because if it's 7 million layers, there's, I mean, how many hammers and nails and wrenches and, you know, are there in existence to get through 7 million? There's not. You get through 1 layer, right? Maybe. So that's why you see the futility of everything that exists in the world. It's all, because nothing can get through those 7 million layers. Nothing has a chance. It's all just like slingshots into a nuclear war. Yeah. Right? So at least you begin to get, if nothing else, at least you begin to get at least an inkling of just how anemic and irrelevant and comical and tabloid-ish and superficial and cosmetic and really laughable. I mean, you got a glimpse of the war that's there. You got a glimpse of the nuclear biological war that's there in the form of 7 million layers of conditioning and shackles. And what's out there? Oh, well, try some mindfulness. Change your behavior. Maybe meditate for 20 minutes a day, or try to, it's a joke. And it's so much of a joke that it's an insult. That's what I've said many times. It's an insult to the gravity of what the shackles and the layers, the million layers of pain and conditioning and imprisonment are. It's an insult to those things. At the very least, acknowledge. That's like to tell someone to go off and meditate or do mindfulness or do whatever. Right? That's like the person's bleeding. That literally is like the person's leg is chopped off and it's being held together by, one patch of skin, right? His bone is cut off. His ligaments are cut. He's gushing blood everywhere. He's going to die at any minute. He's got one piece of skin, which is keeping his leg attached. And then someone tells him, well, why are you being over dramatic? Like, why are you crying with so much pain? Just shake it off. That's what this is. But everyone thinks, oh no, that's really weighty and, like significant advice to tell someone to go practice mindfulness or the 3Ds or start a diary or gratitude. And not that if one did those things through his own accord and whatever, but it's so dismissive. It is so insulting. That's an insult to someone have his leg chopped off when you tell him he's overreacting. That's an insult. It's not true, first of all, and it's an insult on top of it. There's a genuine problem there. He's not crying for no reason. Obviously this is serious. And the millions of layers that you're describing, that's you're not, there's not some, you're being the scapegoat here. Every single human being is you. Every single one, has the millions of layers. There's not somebody who doesn't have, everyone does. And so if that is the fact, and if that is the place that everyone is, and all they're looking for and all they're getting is some ointment and some moisturizing cream to put on their, broken off leg, that's the place where you are. Not you, but that's where everyone is. That's the world.
Yeah.
The world cannot give you anything but moisturization
and bullshit
or hand cream for you got, every human with cancer and hemorrhage and impending death and legs cut off. These are, I mean it symbolically and figuratively, but the pain is no less. The suffering is no less. Every human being is deeply, deeply suffering, and in their own way. And then you look into the world naturally you look into the world, with good intention. Okay, I need some help with my suffering. Oh, well, just go just put a patch on it and then everyone, oh, that's a good advice. That's really, it's idiotic. If people realize the depth, number one, the depth, as you have just stated, if people realize the depths of the millions of layers of pain and conditioning and suffering that they've not only experienced to say, well, you've experienced it, but now it's gone. No, everyone is living under a mountain of rubble, bottom line. Okay. Right now and tomorrow and the next day, every minute of every day. And then every now and then they get a moment of happiness where they come up for a pocket of air and they go right back down into the suffering. So that's where everyone lives. So if that's the case, which it is, no matter what part of the world you are, that's human. then if that's the case, which is fine, that's fine. But then what, where do you go from there? Here's some moisturizing cream, and stop over dramatizing it, and pick yourself up, and don't worry, and be happy, and go talk it out with someone, and go and like I said, I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things. If you if you need a pocket of air, you need a pocket of air. Everyone does. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do anything. Whatever you want. I don't care. Meditate, mindfulness, to see psychotherapists. It's one must do what they must do to survive, So I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things. What I'm saying is that the seriousness of where human beings live, the seriousness of the suffering, is matched by a joke in the world. It is not serious. It is not, however serious that suffering is, which is, 11 out of 10 for everybody, then even a partial match for that, as far as in the form of health or in the form of a potential cure or anything serious, is non-existent. And that is what has to be realized by one who wishes to realize it. That's the world in which you live. And until that realization dawns, then the person is going to keep getting ointment and thinking that the ointment is like this really deep penetrating, solution to their wounds.
Thank you.
Hi, Kapil. I don't know exactly how to ask this question. So I'm trying to build an understanding of basic human nature. In other words, when I'm interacting with people and the world, it's quite clear. Like you just said, it's a lot of suffering. Everybody's suffering through a lot of different things, and I find myself to be unhappy. In other words, all those interactions with either people or the world have generally led to some level of unhappiness. At the same time, I find that there's something very intrinsic that connects human beings together, and I've not been able to figure out what that is. In other words, we came from evolutionary ways.
You're just going right down that slide of scientific nonsense. This evolutionary and something connects everybody. You have that's what I mean. There's no reality in what you're saying. There's no reality. If you want to talk about connection and all that stuff, okay, you know what? Get to the place where you have no more suffering, and then you feel connected to everybody, and then nothing really bothers you. Then talk about that. Okay? But don't be talking about spirituality when your leg's cut off. You need an emergency room. This is just more ways to try to socialize and engage with the world. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm not I have to put these disclaimers in there, because I don't want to ever say that you should do this and don't engage with the world. I don't care what you do. I just don't care. Right. So, but don't start the evolution and the intellectual list. I don't want to hear that. Right. So you begin with, I'm suffering and I'm unhappy. Okay. It's honest. Everyone is. Right. And then you put some ointment on there, and you try to anesthetize it by going into, there's human connection. What has human connection gotten you? Get to it's like this fundamental dishonesty and covering up what you began with honesty with dirt from the world. You started by saying that the engaging with the world and with people created problems for you and suffering. Truth. Okay? Not just you. Truth. Okay? And then you diminished that. You just poured water all over that. Right? There's connection, and okay, then connect. Right? Go ahead.
No,
connect.
so thank you.
I'm not saying you shouldn't connect.
I guess what I was trying to say is I haven't quite figured that part out, because, and you're right.
And you're never going to figure it out, because you're never going to figure that out, because you're doing it based upon, on the one hand, you're describing your reality of suffering, which is not your reality. It's everyone's reality, number one. Okay. I want to make that clear that I'm not picking on anybody here. Okay. Number one, you're describing the reality of suffering. And then on the other hand, you're trying to like put a square peg into a round hole by saying, yeah, but I have to put this connection thing in there because that just sounds right. And that's spiritually correct. And that's just intellectually this. And your scientific stuff will destroy you as it already has. You're never going to get past that.
And I've seen some things that have shown me in some way that what I care about determines what I get. The statement maybe seems really obvious, but in the way that I've seen it, it is true in a way that I can't really express in words. It was way more direct and powerful and instantaneous and effectful than I could express or I could have imagined before. It was like there was me, and then there was whatever was reacting to me. And that thing instantaneously made whatever I wanted to be real. It, I don't know if this words are accurate. It fulfilled my wishes instantaneously. But I couldn't stop wanting the thing that didn't give me what I wanted. I just kept wanting the same thing and kept wanting it, like over and over and over again. It was like, I don't know, this metaphor makes sense for me. It was like, imagine I am pushing a button and it gives me like instant satisfaction, and it was just pushing it over and over again. I was like stuck in a loop, like an addiction. I have experience with like quote unquote normal addiction, but this was like 10,000 times stronger. I can't really access that space right now. I just remembering. That's all I remember. And my question is basically, what is that? Why is that? What am I addicted to? And is the cure to that addiction the same that any other addiction is cured? Because I have some, I don't know, hope, belief, or whatever that I have cured other addictions, and I guess I kind of know how that works. So yeah, is addiction? I guess I've seen that addiction. What am I addicted to? Why is that? That's my question. Thank you.
So to provide an answer for that would turn what you recognized on an experiential and deep level and take you into an intellectual discussion as to why it happens. And your realization of what is happening is far more critical and has far more weight than you knowing the intellectual reason as to why it happened.
From time to time, I do suffer. To be honest, most of my time, most of my life, I am very happy. But sometimes I do suffer. Sometimes I do cry. But on some level, I feel disgust by suffering. On some level, suffering is not okay for me. And when the eternal pain arises, I almost grab it by the throat, and I don't want to distract myself. I don't want any pleasure. I don't run away from it, not by prescription, but naturally. I want to see every single one of my pains and my sufferings. And don't want to brag about it, but I feel I am making a huge progress towards a peace and suffering less, so to say. The reason what I want to ask you is to open up more about your statement that life is suffering, because the reason why I listen to your work is to overcome that suffering. Your work is sorry for putting in hierarchical, but your work is the number one for like the best stuff I ever heard in my life is your work. And I'm listening to you because I do want to reach this non-suffering state. Suffering is not okay for me. blow this planet with all the peoples inside it, I don't want to suffer about it. This is not okay for me to suffer about it. But I feel confused when you say that life is suffering and you are offended by smiles, because I do like my smiles, and I do want to live a peaceful and happy life. And I don't really understand why you are saying that life is suffering. Like, isn't that supposed to be the way? It's not like I feel like I don't even have a choice but to overcome my sufferings. And but this, your statement that life is suffering and always will be, makes me confused, because there is a point when I want to reach the state of no suffering.
Well, it's your words are confusing, because if you find that life is not suffering, and I say that life is suffering, then it would make no sense for you to listen to me, because your own experience is more important than anything else. What you have found for yourself is more important than any other human being that has ever lived. That is your own experience. But then you, having said that, then you say, but you do suffer, and that you're trying to get over that suffering. So you're saying both things. The bottom line is, it doesn't matter what I say. It matters whether whatever I say is congruent with your own experience, whether it matches up with your own experience. Not that it should and not that it shouldn't. But I think if you try to focus on what I say, try to make it fit, I think you kind of sacrifice yourself, which moving away from your own experiences as being your guide really that kind of gets you lost.
Hello, Kapil. Thank you for being authentic and uncompromising. Your words truly have some kind of a transmission that has transformed my life profoundly. My question is about enlightenment. And I think for several decades, I've been drawn to this enlightenment, but now I am really maybe talking out of frustration. And I really respect your thoughts on this, and maybe, I want to know, is enlightenment real, and or is it a wild goose chase? If there is something called as ultimate freedom, I shouldn't have to seek or search it, right? Because that seems to be a very intense bondage itself for me. I hope you can shed some light on this.
So does ultimate freedom exist? Yes. But you have to understand the words that you use. You said that if I have to search for it, then it's a bondage. But do you already have it?
I do not.
Okay. So if you don't have it, then that means that if you want it, that you have to get it, right? If you want it, not that you should, but if you want it, whatever you want, even if it's a glass of water, you have to get it, right?
Right.
Okay. So when you say that searching for it is a bondage, what you are really saying is that the only way that you know how to search for it is through prescriptions. The only way that you know how to search for it is through the vehicles and the conditioning and the modalities and the methods and the techniques and the perspectives and the concepts that the world has taught you. Through the things that have been set up by the world with spirituality and austerity and ceremony and whatever, read this and do that and practice this and practice that and do, so that's what you're really saying.
You are right. In the past, at least for 10 to 14 years, I was pursuing it through prescriptions, and that didn't get me anywhere. But since getting exposed to your work, my intensity has grown exponentially, and I have seen little that I near or I don't see any progress, makes me suffer even further. And that's the reason why I termed it as it is creating more bondage for me. And I feel like, dropping this entire thing would be more freeing than being so intense. And I don't know if that is a choice that I have to do that volitionally.
So the disconnect, the thing that one has to understand is that just because you have been exposed, and by the way, that isn't a small thing. That is not a small thing to be exposed to the fact that prescriptions, that for you, they haven't gotten you anywhere. Okay. I'm trying to be very careful in my word choice so that I don't say that people should not follow prescriptions, because I have no interest in telling people what they should and should not follow. I have no interest in that. So I'm very careful. That's why I said very, very specifically, I said that for you, the following the prescriptions by your own admission has not gotten you anywhere. But so while on the one hand, it is a valuable thing to recognize even the basic level. And that basic level is huge. Like I said, that's 0.0001, but that's 0.00001 that basically no one on earth will ever get to, except for 15 people. Okay. Because like I said before, the idea of prescriptions isn't even known. Aside from like medical prescriptions, Advil or something like that. But I think the thing to realize is that you believe that while it's a valuable thing that you have been turned on to the fact that prescriptions have not worked for you, at the same time, you believe that just by having recognized that's reached into your soul, and that has flushed all of the prescriptionizing out of your system, that would be very unlikely, to put it conservatively. And therefore, as long as one is still seeking through prescription because of his conditioning, even though he has gotten a glimpse into the strings behind the stage of prescription, that is bondage. And that's why the bondage still exists.